Weiss's breath came out a little heavier as they cleaned out the last of the white fang in what felt like the fourth carriage. She brushed her weapon against her skirt, clearing it of some blood and grime. Her opponents would live, be that in pain. A part of her thought that too much of mercy for a terrorist scum, but it was hard to take that final step to ending a life. Yeesh, Yang sighed. Quantity has its own quality. I'll give them that. The blonde dragged Afonis up by his collar and knocked him out with one solid blow. Not much, she added, but it's starting to weigh even me down. They can't keep it up, Blake said. They're just trying to overwhelm us, but these all feel like new recruits. Some of them don't even have their aura, Weiss pointed out as she stepped cautiously past the unconscious figure. Up ahead, one of the White Fang grunts groaned and tried to pull himself up. Weiss moved to knock him out, but stopped when Blake's hand clutched her shoulder. Let me talk to him, she whispered, stepping past and towards the figure. She knelt down by the terrorist, turning him over so that he lay on his back. He limply tried to punch her, but Blake swatted the arm away with ease. We're looking for our companion, she said. Where is he? Race traitor, the grunt whispered. He tried to spit up at Blake, but it just dribbled across his face. I won't ask again. Blake growled and gripped the man's collar and banged his head against the floor. Weiss hesitated nearby, unsure what she should do. She wanted to intervene, to stop Blake from doing that to a defeated foe. But at the same time, it was Jaune's life on the line. A look to Yang didn't provide any answers, for the blonde's face was uncharacteristically grim. Up ahead, the Faunus moaned. Perhaps he'd given up, or maybe he thought it just pointless. You won't reach him though. You won't get past Banesaw. Let us deal with that. What have you done to our teammate? What did Torchwick do to him? Interrogation. Jaune wouldn't talk. Blake scoffed. I want details. What did he do? He gave him something special. It's too late. Even if he lives, his mind will be gone. The raccoon-eared man tossed his head back and laughed. A better fate than what awaits him in Vale when we strike. At least he won't feel the same pain we felt when the Blake growled and took out her weapon. She cuffed the Faunus about the skull with it, and then dumped his body onto the ground. What was that about? Yang asked nervously. Not in his right mind. What did he mean by that? Weiss gnawed on her lip. She wasn't sure, but the certainty in those words made her worried regardless. They'd given him something that would make him talk. Blake, she asked, do you know anything about what this might be? The raven-haired teammate looked furious, hands curled into fists as she stared at the unconscious grunt. I've been thinking about it, she said. Back when Torchwick said he did something to make Jaune talk, to tell him all sorts of things. At first I thought torture. Some of the White Fang would do that to humans they captured. Sometimes even Faunus too. Her breath hitched. Torture. It was something she knew was almost a certainty, yet had been denying with every fiber of her being. To imagine him broken and bloodied. She didn't want to. I don't think it fits though, Blake went on. Not with what Torchwick said or what Jaune is like. He's too stubborn for that. And there wasn't much time. I doubt Jaune would give in that easily, and we know he's alive. So it can't have been anything too violent. This guy said Torchwick gave something to him. Blake cursed and looked to the side, furious beyond belief. It sounds like he'd been given a truth serum. Truth serum? Yang scoffed. You've got to be joking. It's not a real truth serum. It's just what people call it, just to make it sound nicer. Most people would just know it as pumping someone with drugs until they talk or die. Blake looked away. It'd be an easy way to break someone too stubborn to give up. And the White Fang are willing to do this? Why snapped. Do they know No Low? They never did before. Blake protested. At least, not that I know of. Honestly, these guys are just chaff, Weiss. This is Torchwick we're dealing with, and he would definitely do it. Weiss shook her head, agitation mixed with fear flashing through her mind. This was worse, so much worse than mere torture. So long as Jaune was alive, he could recover from physical wounds, but narcotics struck the mind. What if he... No, she wouldn't believe it. She wouldn't even entertain the thought. We need to move on, she snapped. Finding Jaune is now our biggest priority. We've no idea what state he'll be in, but he probably won't be capable of defending himself. He won't be capable of much if it's as bad as this guy said, Yang growled. Won't I get a hold of Torchwick? Join the queue. Blake tossed her head, amber eyes ablaze. He has a lot to answer for, and I intend to collect. Not if I get there first, Weiss thought, running a finger across the hilt of her weapon. She stepped past the other two and into the next car. It was empty, a change from the past few. Above them, a gunshot sounded, a reminder that the fight between Crow and the mysterious girl was still in full swing. The second carriage was empty too, but when she rushed into the third, it was only her own instincts which prevented the chainsaw taking off her head. Weiss's shoulder hit the ground as she rolled beneath it and away. The bulky man turned with a snarl. A snee. I've always wanted to kill one. Weiss! Blake yelled, firing a shot off that the man deflected with his weapon. The dark-haired girl used it as a distraction to push by and help Weiss back onto her feet. I'm fine, Weiss whispered. I take it this is the Banesaw the guy spoke about? Yang looked the man up and down and then laughed. Banesaw with a chainsaw? What a stupid name. Yang had to duck back as the weapon grated and sparked against the wall she'd been by. Well, looks like someone's self-conscious. We don't have time for this idiot, Weiss growled. Get out of our way. We're here for our teammate. You mean the blonde kid? Banesaw asked. The three of them froze. Where is he? Blake demanded. He's around. The man chuckled. I doubt he'll want to see you though. Last I saw, he was having a good time, all lost in his own little world. Weiss's weapon was torn free in an instant. You monster, Weiss snarled. Weiss? Yang interrupted her. The blonde shook her head. Don't let him get to you, Weiss Cream. Tall, blonde and scraggy is going to need your help. Leave me here. I can take this guy. Leave her? Weiss hesitated, teeth biting her lower lip. The man was huge, enough so to wield his unusual weapon with ease. But this was Yang they were talking about. She didn't have a reputation without a good reason. And despite her brawling style, she was quick on her feet as the best of them. Hey, the blonde grinned and sent her a wink. Have a little faith. I'm gonna trust you two to find and save Jaune. Don't let me down. Determination slammed into place. Got it. She nodded, taking a step back. Make sure you come out of this as well. He'll be furious if you get hurt. Don't I know it? Yang chuckled. He might even try and spank me again. I'll be fine. Go. Weiss nodded and darted to the right, Blake on her heels. Not on my watch. Banesaw yelled, cutting towards them. Yang taunted, slipping between them and kicking the terrorist back. Your fight's with me, big guy. Yang would be okay. Weiss was sure of it. The sounds of combat echoed behind them as the two remaining members of the team sprinted down the train. The first car was empty, as was the second and the third. By the time they reached the fourth, Weiss started to worry. Where are all the White Fang? She asked, head turned towards Blake as they kept running. It doesn't make sense for them to all to be missing. They rushed us earlier. They might have exhausted most of their numbers. Then why have that guy at the end? He should have fought at the front. We're only halfway down the train, for crying out loud. There has to be more of them. I don't know, Weiss. Blake sighed. This whole thing. This isn't how they normally do things. You're right though. We should be facing more resistance. Something is wrong here. The thought refused to leave her mind, even as they approached the end of the current car. If that man back there was some kind of commander, then surely he should have placed some reinforcements nearby. It just didn't make sense. Blake pressed her back against the wall beside the next door, having reached it first, and decided to wait for her. Weiss nodded as she arrived, weapon in hand, as she touched a button and watched it swish open. With a quick nod to one another, they stepped inside. It was like a scene from a nightmare. Bile rose up in Weiss's throat, and she had to grip her mouth to avoid throwing up. She staggered instead, one hand pressed against the wall for support, only to gasp and tear it away when it felt slick and wet. Her hand was covered in blood. "My God," Blake whispered. This. She didn't need to finish. Not for this. It was the site of a massacre. 4 bodies littered the floor, while 2 more slumped at the base of the walls. Blood pooled from them, but there were stacked patterns painted on the wall as well. Bullet holes, smears, and scorch marks were all evidence of some horrible battle taking place. One that the White Fang had most assuredly lost. The acrid scent clogged her nostrils, bringing up her dinner as she took several large gulps of air. She couldn't speak, and lumped towards the next door in search of an escape. Blake didn't argue but followed instead, hitting the door open so they could break through and away from the horrible scene. It proved futile. The first thing Weiss saw was the terrified face of a man with glasses. Then she saw the curved saber that protruded from his throat. It propped his head up so that it looked like he stared at them, his body impaled to the wall. She gagged and fell to her knees, clutching her mouth. "Take deep breaths," Blake whispered, rubbing her back. It doesn't get easier, but you do get used to it." Weiss took her teammate's advice. She greedily drew in air, exhaling just as quickly, eyes clenched shut. It didn't help nearly as much as she would have liked, but the shock soon wore off. When she opened her eyes, it was still to see the same nightmare before her, but also to find that her mind could rationalize it. Weiss shook her head. "What do you think happened?" "It looks like a Grim got on board," Blake said. She stepped past the dead faunus and indicated towards the floor. There was a trail of blood that looked as though something had been dragged away. It led down the center of the car and towards the next door. "We should follow it." That sounded like a terrible idea. In fact, she was fairly sure those were the exact lines spoken by every horror movie victim ever, right before they stumbled upon the beast and got their insides torn out. Blake seemed to agree, for she winced. What choice did they have, though? "You're right." Weiss forced herself to stand, but refused to look at the dead man as she stepped forward. "Whatever this is, we need to find it and stop it before it reaches wherever Jaune is kept. He won't be able to defend himself. I won't let anything hurt him, Weiss." Weiss corrected. Her eyes were hard, her heart even more so. "We won't let anyone hurt him." He had to kill them. It was so simple, so blisteringly simple. He wasn't sure what it would achieve. That was still lost to him, in a haze of muddied thoughts and nausea, as the sound of rattling tracks, gunfire, and screams echoed in his ears. He only knew what he had to do, not because the voice told him to, but because deep inside, a part of him agreed with it. A part of him felt used to it, as though it were normal. There was no hesitation in driving the sword through the chest of one animal-eared man's chest, nor was there any awkward feeling in taking his gun as he fell, in turning and spraying at another until that person's body was pinned back against the wall, riddled and twitching as blood poured from his body. If anything, he felt detached from it all, distant, on a cloud in the sky. His body shook as he crashed back down. Pangs wrecked his stomach and he bent double. It was always up and down. There one moment, gone the next. He needed to concentrate. But someone was screaming to kill him now, while he was distracted. Why was he screaming? He would need to make him be quiet. Something ricocheted off his shoulder, but he ignored it and clamped his hands around the neck of the one that wouldn't let him concentrate. Blessed silence reigned. But for the gargled and mumbled words he couldn't make out. Feet, suspended off the floor, kicked at his shins. "Shut up already," he slurred. The animal did. He stayed quiet when he was let go. In fact, he slumped to the floor and didn't move at all. That was good. Another wave struck him, along with something metal, and he staggered to the left. Something filtered back into his head, through the maze of fogged up thoughts and dizzy dreams. He was on a train. That was important. Very important. He had to get to the front of the train to stop something. Did he need to stop the train? The thought made him panic, enough so that he was nearly sick. Not to stop the train, he decided. He wouldn't if it made him feel that bad. Something else then. But what could he stop if not the train itself? Don't let him pass, someone shouted. Don't let him get to Torchwick. His body snapped. His body moved. How could it move if it was snapped? He wasn't sure. But as he pinned the one who'd spoken up against the wall, he realized, not his body, but something deep inside him. He bared his teeth, snarling at something he hated more than anything else. "Torchwick," he hissed through teeth that felt too big for his mouth. That name, he hated it. He had to stop it. "Where's Torchwick? We'll kill you." Kill him? It wasn't even something that registered as a threat. They couldn't kill him. He knew that. Even if they could draw blood and make him stop breathing, they couldn't actually cause his life to end. No one could. "We'll kill all of you," the animal said. That frightened him. Even through the drugs, through the nausea and the hate, he felt the fear that lanced through his heart. "No," he growled and slammed the animal back against the wall. "No!" He wouldn't let him. Wouldn't let any of them. They couldn't kill him, but they could kill someone. Something. The images were blurred still, but the emotions behind them were crystal clear. An arrow, a tower, a dark-haired girl on the floor, red-stained snow and white-shaped world about a dance floor filled with laughter. His hands tightened in cloth as he lifted the figure before him and threw him at another. They both fell in a tangle of limbs, but something struck his side when he turned to them. It didn't hurt, but he staggered back from the force. "Move." The voice returned, and with it, action. He lunged forward, clumsily but with a savage his opponent couldn't hope to match. His hands settled around something hot that buckled as he turned it away. A scream echoed in his ears, but he cut it off as he snatched something from the animal's belt. It flashed silver in the air, but soon began to flash a pretty crimson. It felt wrong. It wasn't his job. It did the job, however. Ahead, the tracks of the train churned, and something burned within his mind. He didn't have much time. He didn't know how he knew, but he did, with a certainty that made him sway and push against one wall for support. His hand fell to the side and came away wet. Was that his? How could it be when he couldn't feel anything? There was a wail in his ears, like a high-pitched siren that never changed pitch and wouldn't stop. His world swam, but one thought remained clear. Hurry. He had to hurry. He had to make it to the front, to the orange and the name and the fire and the twisted metal. He had to. He had to finish something. And then, Only then could he close his eyes. Roman scowled as he checked the monitors and then looked down at his scroll. There was still some time before they hit, but it was close. At best hope Cinta proves as good as her word. Otherwise, I'm not going to be in much of a condition to do otherwise. It was an intimidating prospect to trust his life to another, but she left him with little choice and he was too important for her to lose. Right now, he reminded himself, he would become expendable in time, and then his future was less assured. Not much I can do about that for now, he mused. Better be on this side than the other. At least this way I live long enough to have a chance. A chance to do what? He wasn't sure. Run. Maybe. Hide away. Integrate himself to the monster she was. It was hard to tell. He did what he had to do in order to survive. It was the law of the jungle. Right now, that meant driving a train loaded with explosives straight towards a solid barrier leading into Vale. The impact would hurt like a bitch, even before the explosions, but it wouldn't be quite as bad as the grim that poured in afterwards. Not for the first time, he wondered if he shouldn't have Neo take him away, to go on the run and risk it on their own. That would mean giving up everything he ever worked for, though. It wasn't an option. A loud clang echoed on the door behind him, followed by another as someone struck it. For the love of... Were those animals really so incompetent that they needed his guidance on every little thing? What part of throw your petty lives in front of the enemy until you die did they not understand? What is it? He yelled. Can't you see I'm busy here? The banging didn't slow, nor did it relent in its force. There was a muffled thump, followed by a sound almost like metal grinding against more metal, and then there was nothing. A long sigh escaped him as he locked the brake lever into off and picked up his weapon. Oh yeah, he thought to himself. That silence doesn't sound ominous at all. He pulled his hat down a little tighter over his head, took a long puff of his cigar, and waited for the fireworks to begin. To be fair, it didn't take long. The door exploded back, the metal frame broken through as a body covered in blood pushed in. He tutted and aimed at it, only to curse as he realized it was a dead Faunus impaled on a long knife. The true threat came behind, sailing through the air like some rabid animal crossed with a banshee. With a roll of his eyes, he locked the end of his weapon around its neck and dragged its face into the steel wall behind him. It struck with a mighty clang, enough to send the creature back. It fell to the floor in a heap, but almost seemed to not recognize the pain. In fact, its hands scrabbled for his feet. Blonde hair was muddled with blood, but he knew those eyes, even if the blue was stained red with veins and blood. Roman's lips peeled back in anger. He couldn't believe it. Out of all the people, could those animals do nothing right? With a growl, he stepped out of reach of the mad fool, turned and strode back to the controls. I can't believe this, he said. Really, I can't. I give those stupid beasts one task, and not even a very difficult one at that. He turned back to the huntsman, who wriggled and struggled on the floor. One hand reached out towards him, but he clamped his foot over it. Look at you, kid. You know better than an animal yourself. How is it possible that so many people couldn't stop you? Stop. You. The overdosed idiot mumbled. Stop me? Yes, I've heard it all before, believe me. Roman waved one hand dismissively. Trust me, kid. Better men than you have tried. Honestly, it's starting to get a little old. And do you know what else is getting old? Roman leaned forward to slowly crush the man's fingers beneath his heel. To his displeasure, the idiot didn't scream. Hell, he was probably so high he couldn't even perceive it. There went the worth of his lines. Listen, kid. Roman sighed, aware his wordplay was lost on his audience. You're getting old. You and your dogged refusal to lay down and die. Like a wild animal, The blonde leapt to his feet and surged forwards, no regard for pain or injury, or how his fingers broke beneath his foot. All that was in those eyes was murder, a primal desire to kill. Roman rolled his eyes at the stupidity of it all. Berserk rage might be all well and good, but it didn't leave one worth with much of skill or ability. He slipped past the fist and buried his own in the brat's stomach, whether he felt the pain or not. It forced the air from his lungs and left him open. Roman stepped up beside his guard and snapped his cane into his opponent's jaw. The huntsman dropped like a sack of vegetables. "What is it that separates us from the animals, Roman taunted as he stepped around the boy. "It's our intelligence, our minds. But once you lose it, what are we?" A hand lashed out to try and grip his ankle. He let it, then stomped his other down atop it. "We're nothing," he laughed. "You're nothing. Look at you. You're like some mindless beast. No better than a Grim." He snarled and growled on the floor, a withering mess of arms and legs that futilely tried to reach him. He might have felt pity for the fool, but could only bring himself to feel disgusted instead. He spat down on him and stepped away. This is what drugs do to a man. I knew there was a reason I always stayed away from them. Roman crouched down before him and gripped the brat's chin between his hands. He pulled the head up so he could look into those bloodshot eyes. "You were an actual threat back in Vale," he mused. "Funny how fast you lose it all when your mind isn't in the right place. I could tell. Back when you were masquerading as one of those animals. You're not a fighter, kid. At least not like those brainless idiots." Roman tapped a finger to the boy's forehead. "You're a thinker. A schemer." He let the head fall. "Without that, you're nothing more than a below-average psychopath with a weapon and your aura unlocked. More than enough to kill the White Fang, clearly. But that wasn't very hard, was it? Not when he had the worst of the worst, the uninitiated peons and those who no longer cared for life. The only one worth crap among them was that lug with the chainsaw. Well, that and, well, Perry, he supposed. Not that he could remember who that was. Honestly, he'd just taken to calling them all Perry. "You're too late to stop the show," Roman said. "We're almost there and, you know, just in case." He lifted one foot into the air and slammed it down onto the brake. The thin, metal stick bent and snapped in two. "Yep, no stopping this wild ride now." He laughed and turned back around. "So, what are you going to The monster was right in front of his face. How it had gotten up, how he had done it so quietly, or why he hadn't sensed it, he didn't know. But it was less than a foot away. His arm snapped to bring forth his weapon, but it was faster. He cried out as his back struck the control panel, jagged machinery digging into his spine. A hand gripped his hair and pushed his head back. It was his instinct alone that let him get his arm up before his throat. A searing pain shot through it, and he gasped as he kicked out to brush the monster away. "You bit me!" he cried. "You fucking freak!" The incoherent roar echoed off the cramped cabin as the beast lunged for him. Roman growled back, twisted, and flicked out his cane to deter the attack. An arm came up at the last second, catching the steel on the back, even as that caused bone to crack loudly. The second hesitation cost him his full weight of the huntsman bore down upon him. It bit and tore, snarled and gashed its teeth with wildness in its eyes that spoke of naught but murder. Through the haze of pain, Roman struggled to keep his weapon above him. Between his face and the madman's, it was hard. The monster pushed down with reckless strength, unheeding of what damage it caused itself. Maybe, he considered, in the middle of his panic, just maybe pumping someone he knew to be a psychopath full of drugs might have been a bad idea. To be fair though, he hadn't expected the bastard to get up and kill his handlers. Gods, he hadn't expected him to get up at all. You're persistent, Roman gasped. I'll give you that, kid. Torch wick. It groaned, like a freaking zombie. Oh yeah, definitely a bad idea. I should have killed you when I had the chance. Roman bunched his legs between them both and pressed his knees to the mindless boy's chest. I won't make the same mistake twice, he yelled, kicking up with both feet. His assailant was lifted off and crushed back against the nearest wall. It, recovered far faster than it should have been able to. It fell to one knee, a hand wrenching its weapon out of the dead faunus. The bloody knife flashed in the air, a grim spectacle as it lunged in once more for his face. He parried it with ease, deflecting the clumsy lunge to the side and then blocking the follow-up slice with the side of his cane. In and out, again and again, he hacked and slashed to no avail, each attack echoed by the sound of steel on steel in their panted breath. I could kill this idiot, Roman considered. I could knock him down and blow his brains out. To hell with what damage a shot in this confined space would do. It would be so damned easy. But it wouldn't fulfill her plan. He needed to be arrested. He needed to be taken in and handed over to Ironwood, or to turn their silly little toys against them. If he killed this kid, if he butchered him right here and now, then the chances of that peaceful arrest happening soon dwindled. Yet again, that crazy bitch had his life on the line, and yet again, he was dealing with the fallout. A bead of sweat ran down his brow as he felt fatigue rear its ugly head. Surely, the kid would run out of steam first. Surely. As the monster masquerading as a man screamed and lunged in once more, Roman wasn't quite so sure anymore.